To the conversation. I am Kwame Thomas. Today we're joined by government senator and senior member of the JLP Communications Task Force, Marlon Morgan, a recent appointee to Jamaica's Senate. Stay tuned as we delve into his new role as the nation's pressing issues. Stay with us. Welcome to the conversation. How are you?
Greetings, Kwame. Thanks for having me. Good to be here to have this, frank and candid and, shall I say, timely conversation, my friend.
Timely indeed. Since you have become the face of the Jamaica Labour Party, rumor has it that you have been causing a lot of disturbance and uneasiness in the PNP camp. Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know the degree to which it could be said that I'm the face of the JLP. I consider myself, I'm fairly modest by nature, a member of a team, a member of the JLP's Communications Task Force, where I seek to, provide and create presence for the party in the public conversation. Jamaica is at a critical juncture in its development, as you can appreciate, and throughout this conversation we'll be unpacking and exploring a number of those issues. You have broached the idea of me creating some challenges for the opposition. As far as I'm concerned, I am focused on what it is that the government is about. I'm focused on the issues that matter to the people of Jamaica. And I am mindful that the politics that we practice here in Jamaica, the body politic as a whole, is competitive by nature. And of course, you have two sides, the PNP and the Jamaica Labour Party, that is competing to govern this country. And I believe that the decision of the Jamaican people ought to come down to the issues and which of the two political parties are better placed at this time to take charge of the nation's affairs and, of course, preside over the affairs of Jamaica land we love.
All right, good. So we're looking now at polls, perception, and the political strategy.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that we want to have some clarity on, these polls that we're seeing, we see the blue dot polls, we see the Don Anderson polls, and no doubt you would have had your internal polls.
Yes.
Are these polls a wake-up call, or are they just stirring political noise?
Well, I wouldn't dismiss polls as stirring political noise. On the contrary, Kwame, the polls are a snapshot in time. Polls are decision-making tools. Polls are certainly for political strategists like myself and for players in the politics are, scientific bases on which we try to glean and canvass the sentiment of the population. We gauge how people are thinking and feeling at a particular point in time. And importantly, though, we do not look at polls in isolation. You try to detect trends. You try to gauge the direction in which the wind is blowing so that it can inform your strategy so that you can make adjustments. As you know, when the big managers in the English Premier League are seeing their team play, you look at what is happening in the field of play, and when they go in for halftime, you effect some changes. You may pull some players out, inject some players onto the park, and that is particularly what we do in the politics, where we're mindful of what it is that we're about, the destination we're seeking to get to, and what it is that you have to do to remain on course to get to that destination. So it's a lot like that, and we don't dismiss polls and treat them lightly. So
with that said, there has been a tightening between both major political parties, and given that the JLP's support has only marginally increased by a factor of about 0.5%, despite the PNP's decline, does this indicate a stagnation in your party's appeal, though?
All right, good question, and it comes back to the primary observation I made just now. First of all, as you indicated in the lead into the question, Kwame, the nation has since had two of our esteemed pollsters going out into the field, that being the Don Anderson polls via Market Research Strategies Limited, and of course Lauren Peart's Blue Dot polls commissioned by a particular media house, right? Now, we note that in the Blue Dot poll, they found that the JLP is in the ascendancy insofar as enjoying a 6 percentage point lead, which is
Nearly
clearly
6.
outside, nearly 6, clearly outside their margin of error, which is 2.5%. In respect to the Blue Dot polls, we note that the Don Anderson polls rather, we note that the Don Anderson polls has returned a finding in terms of voter intent, which is the PNP enjoying a 5% lead, which is down from the 9% lead they ostensibly enjoyed per the Don Anderson polls some months ago. And what the polls are indicating, the Don Anderson polls that is that that fall off went to the undecided block, and the JLP would have just increased marginally. We're in no way dejected or daunted by that. We know what our program of work is and what it is that we need to do to secure a third successive term as the government of Jamaica.
So would you argue then, not argue, but is there any level of skepticism as far as the poll is concerned? How do you respond to those concerns about methodology and transparency, and whether or not these are actually an indication of voter intent? You know, there are snapshot in time, but voter representation and intent.
Well, so in terms of the Blue Dot poll, we particularly in the Labour Party appreciate the transparency and the unpacking that the principals at Blue Dot go whenever they partner with the media house that commissions them to indicate to the public in no uncertain terms the methodology that they utilize, how they go about deriving a sample, how they frame the questions and so on. And you get a clear sense, an open and transparent sense as to how it is that they come by the numbers that they come by. It is less so, I would suggest, in terms of a transparent unpacking as to the methodology where the Don Anderson polls are concerned. But I'm not here in this conversation to impugn polls or to disparage Don Anderson's work or Blue Dot's work. We know that as a political party, the polls are essentially scientifically predicated. We know that there are allegations that a particular pollster in the country and a particular poll is in the business of fudging the numbers. You've heard Andrea Moore's husband on the occasion of Andrea Moore's funeral, may God rest her soul, indicating, and charging that the PNP as a political party has been using a particular pollster for certain underhanded purposes. That's an allegation. We don't necessarily dwell on that. As I said before, Kwame, as a political party seeking to form government for a third successive term, we are focused on our program of work, and you have seen the fruits of that in recent months. The truth is that the government has done quite a bit. The government is mindful that there are Jamaicans out there who have had some hardships, have had hard times, because coming out of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic that is, we have had challenges in global shipping and logistics, which has increased the cost of basic food items and other commodities that are imported into the country. And as such, from a pocketbook standpoint, from a cost of living standpoint, and from the standpoint of the supermarket, we sympathize with Jamaicans who have endured some hardship, because some households are relatively better off than others, and we spare a thought for those who are, particularly constrained, which is why the government provided some relief some months ago in terms of $20,000 reverse income tax credit. And for people who did not benefit from that $20,000 reverse income tax credit because they do not necessarily pay income taxes, those persons shortly will be getting their own $20,000 because they are neither on NIS, they are not on PATH, and they do not pay income tax essentially. But they are Jamaicans who are as deserving of the dividends of our hard-fought macroeconomic stability, and they will be getting their share as well in the weeks ahead.
All right, so before we jump into that, though, just want to provide a little bit more clarity as far as the polls are concerned.
Sure.
So one of our reporters went on the road earlier, and, there are questions. Persons weren't so au fait with the polls. Some persons never saw the importance of the poll. Do you think that we spend enough time sharing or saying, these are the polls, these are what they mean, this is why they're important, so you should pay attention to them, as in talking to the average man about that? Yes, we know a JLP will commission a poll, a media house or the PNP, anybody will commission a poll, but how does that help the average man to understand what's actually happening?
Excellent question, Kwame. I'm a hard taskmaster by nature. I mark myself pretty hard by nature, and I am one of those persons who will readily accept that there's room for improvement in terms of public education and helping our people, my Jamaican brothers and sisters, better understand and appreciate the issue of scientific polling, helping them to understand that in other aspects of life as well. Corporate entities do surveys. You have media surveys that are done as well to determine listenership or viewership and so on. So I will accept that there is, more to be done in terms of public education, and that is why we welcome programs like these. We have to big up CeenTV and big up the conversation, because you are helping to provide a platform for us to indicate that, yes, we have persons who, based on their training and their competence, are able to go out and deploy across Jamaica in a scientific and empirical way to gauge perspectives on a range of issues. And polls is not just a phenomenon for politics. As I said before, corporate entities undertake polls and commission, posters to do what is called market research and that kind of thing. And so it is important for people to understand that a poll is a snapshot in time. It tells the viewer and the observer what the response and feeling of persons are, the respondents to that poll, to the respective questions at a particular point in time. And as I said before, it is foolhardy to look at a poll in isolation of other polls, or to just look at it in and of itself, as opposed to connecting dots and gleaning perspectives and information from it that can help to inform you. For us, the Jamaica Labour Party, polls help us to inform our political strategy, and polls help us to know where some deficits are and what you can tighten up. So in as much as Manchester City or Liverpool seek to effect some changes and tighten up here or there with a view to secure the championship, that's what Jamaica Labour Party does as well, because we are keen on securing the championship, which is an election win in the weeks and months ahead to form government in this country for a third successive term.
Weeks and months ahead. All right, continue to stay with us. You are watching The Conversation. I'm speaking with Government Senator, Mr. Marlon Morgan. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to The Conversation. Right now, we're going to be looking at Mr. Morgan's rise or move from communication to legislation. The question is it a strategic move, or is it simply just a leap of faith? So that's the question that we're throwing out now. Your transition from leading or being a senior member of the JLP's communications task force to a Senate position. This is notable. Yeah. Was this appointment, in your mind, a strategic move to leverage your communication expertise in government, or is simply a response to internal party politics or dynamics?
I think it is the former, in that there's a strategic move to leverage my own communications acumen and aptitude. I'll say this, and our Jamaican brothers and sisters may appreciate that one of the things that can be said about Prime Minister Andrew Holness is that he has an eye for talent. He is the same gentleman who recruited Nigel Clark, the same gentleman who recruited Dana Morris-Dixon, Favour Williams, who is now our first woman finance minister. So he does have an eye for talent. He has good judgment politically and from a governance standpoint. You'll recall when the nation was being rocked by levels of murders that left much to be desired. There were many calls, there were many, disparaging remarks in relation to Dr. Horace Chang and his incumbency as National Security Minister. But the Prime Minister elected to stick to his guns and stick to Dr. Horace Chang. And the results of that are what we are reaping today in terms of sustained reductions in murders. At present, year to date, we are seeing a 35% reduction in murders. So just to come back to my own engagement, I just apprised listeners that I did a stint in the civil service. I would have, noted certain deficits. I made myself available to come back into the cut and thrust of the politics sometime last year, and the rest, as they say, is history. I have been back on the field of play. It is a field that I'm not unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
I have been a student of the politics over many years. I served in Generation 2000, the Labour Party's young professional affiliate, climbed through the ranks and served at one point as vice president. And during our stint in opposition between 2012 and 2016, I was one of the senior aides to Prime Minister Holness. So I'm no novice in the grand scheme of things, and I'm not one either to toot my own horn, but I do know of the acumen and the skill sets that I bring to the fore.
Yeah.
And all that I am about is to use my own expertise, my own experiences as a person to add value to Jamaica and serve my brothers and sisters in this country.
So then, no, you know, given your own background, what you have said now, how do you plan to enhance transparency and public engagement within this legislative process?
All right, excellent question. The Senate, as you'll appreciate, is the review chamber. It is referred to as the cerebral chamber, where persons are expected to exercise good judgment, to be very painstaking and fastidious in examining pieces of legislation and not necessarily being a rubber stamp. I am like that by nature, and you know, caucusing with the government members, I intend to bring precisely that to our deliberations and our perspectives, because the truth is, Jamaica, as you quite rightly said in the question just now, wants to see greater levels of accountability and, more importantly, transparency, openness, yes, in terms of how decisions are arrived at, because they want to be validated as stakeholders, not just be served lip service, but they want to be brought into the mainstream and be front and center. And that is why, Kwame, when the government considered making Portmore Jamaica's 15th parish, we undertook, first of all, we established a joint select committee, and we undertook considerable consultations, because we know that it is important to canvass, to sensitize the people of Portmore, to canvass them as the immediate and key stakeholders on the matter. And we do accept that in the competitive cut and thrust of the politics, there are those persons, for example, our opponents in the PNP, who will believe that the consultations, and they will argue that the consultations were not sufficient. But alas, that debate has ensued in both the lower house and in the upper house. I was delighted as a Portmore man myself, having moved there at a tender age at 16 months old with my family to reside in Cumberland in Portmore. And I'm delighted to have been to be a product of Portmore and to have contributed to that debate, making it very clear that, listen, what Portmore stands to benefit from becoming Jamaica's 15th parish far outweighs any negative that anyone could possibly cite on the matter. So
I'm happy that you brought up the whole idea of Portmore transitioning to a parish. But some of the recent discussions that we have been a part of have hinted at gerrymandering concerns, suggesting that your party's push for Portmore's parish status, it might be more of a strategic move to ensure that you can secure more seats. You know, so how would you address these allegations?
Well, first of all, I reject those allegations. First of all, the way out Jamaica's politics has evolved, and this is to the credit, of course, of people like Edward Seaga and even more so, former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson. Take nothing away from Prime Minister Patterson. For all his ills and shortcomings, one of the things that he helped to usher in this country is a simmering of the political temperature, as it were, and greater levels of integrity in managing electoral matters, so electoral reform in Jamaica. And so much so that our electoral system is the envy of many around the world. We commenced with an electoral advisory committee, the EAC, that essentially morphed into what we have now, which is the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, the ECJ. So just to be clear, contrary to views that would seek to impugn the motives of the government, the Parliament of the land is the competent authority, Kwame, on the creation of the establishment of parishes in this country. We acknowledge that the last time Jamaica did so was back in 1860s, so in excess of almost a decade and a century and a half, right? So we're mindful of that vintage. However, it is the Electoral Commission of Jamaica that now has a job to do to ensure that the boundaries, the constituency boundaries in Portmore, are appropriately delineated so that you do not have the risk of unconstitutionality where a constituency boundary straddles two or more parishes.
So you have made your presentation in the Senate the other day. Now, it has been said that the reigning mayor, the current mayor,
incumbent mayor,
he's against the idea of Portmore becoming a parish to the extent that he has stated that he will stop at nothing to prevent this from happening. You know, what are some of the plans that you have to ensure that this happens irrespective of what he and his team would have been putting forward?
I think, first of all, rhetoric such as that, Kwame, we heard it from Dayton Campbell, PNP General Secretary, albeit embattled PNP General Secretary, and we have now heard rhetoric to that effect from the incumbent Mayor of Portmore, Marlon Thomas, that the PNP will be taken to the streets. I am suggesting and commending to the PNP a lowering of the temperature and a guarding of the rhetoric, because you do not want persons to be misled, you do not want to foment hostility and for persons to be incited to do things that are untoward. For example, political violence. We saw a meeting at the Portmore Municipal Corporation just some weeks ago where persons almost came to blows. And we saw Mayor Leon Thomas having to, for whatever reason he felt necessary, swipe away the placards of his own constituents, females at that, yes, in a rather hostile manner, and hostile and aggressive manner. And so we do not concur with Leon Thomas's own aspersions that the government is seeking to be expedient. The government is seeking to make a move that will advance the aspirations, the long-held aspirations of the people of Portmore. And historically, Kwame, the records are there to show it, every stakeholder, the PNP and the JLP and the residents of Portmore themselves were desirous of and had aspirations from decades ago for Portmore ultimately to become Jamaica's 15th parish.
You have argued that just now that the People's National Party should lower the temperature, using your own words.
Sure,
they should lower. Unpack that a little bit, because what we're hearing from one camp is that enough consultations were done, and that is the reason, or one of the primary reasons behind this thrust for increasing the temperature, so to speak. But you're saying lower the temperature.
And I'll tell you why I get to
that.
In the United States, we saw what happened January 6th of 2021 it was, right, when they had one of their lower moments in U.S. political history. Now, just to be very clear, a government that is elected, a political party that has a majority consequent on the holding of an election, forms government with the imprimatur, the blessing and endorsement of a majority of the electorate. Yes? Now, the idea is that it is the prerogative of the government to bring legislation, and the government has acted in that particular manner in this instance. The government has determined, in keeping with a manifesto commitment that it gave back in the lead up to the 2020 general elections, that it is our intent to create Portmore, to establish Portmore rather, as Jamaica's 15th parish. Now, we don't take issue with persons having other perspectives or other views. We put the matter to the people voted in respect of that matter, among others that we had placed on the table, and the truth is, whilst the parliamentary opposition may not concur with what we are intent on doing, the very setup of our Westminster-style representative political parliamentary system, yes, is of such that, listen, the government is able to advance legislation in this case. And of course, the government did the responsible thing in relation to this by facilitating and establishing a joint select committee and of course, holding consultations. Now, the PNP are essentially out and about saying that they're going to take to the streets and so on. And I'm again renewing the call. It is best to not do those kinds of things and have that rhetoric persisting, because persons may be led and incited, I suggest, Kwame, to do things that are destructive and untoward, because not everybody in the heat of the moment may be restrained and constrained in their behavior when they are protesting or taking to the street, so as we saw in the U.S. Capitol some years ago.
So as we ease into the break, though, one of the things that I want you to think about is whether or not there would have been, or there is space for a referendum where the actual citizens would have been able to vote on this. So ruminate on that. Just want to remind you that you're watching the conversation where I'm here with Government Senator Mr. Marlon Morgan. Continue to stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the conversation. Just before the break, we asked the question whether or not there was or there is still room for the residents of Portmore and possibly the country to take part in a referendum to vote for what they actually want. You know, you're about to say something on that.
So, in principle and philosophically, in fact, historically, the JLP has never been averse to the business of referenda in this country. In fact, the first referendum and the only referendum to date that we have had, the JLP came out as the victors, and that is why we have Jamaica as a state existing in the way it exists now. The PNP were for federation, as per Norman Manley. The JLP, as per Sir Alexander Bustamante, was for Jamaica as an independent state. Now, the PNP, we believe, they may suggest, you know, views to the contrary. They will posit views to the contrary. But the PNP, we in the Jamaica Labour Party believe, is being opportunistic and vulgar and expedient on the question of a referendum in relation to Portmore's establishment as Jamaica's 15th parish. And we'll tell you why. Historically, we have long said on the question of Jamaica's, a determination on Jamaica's appellate court, yes, or final appellate court, the matter is to be put to the people for them to make a determination. And the very people who are now talking about referendum because they see it expedient so to do were averse to a referendum in relation to Jamaica's final court. But not only that, when the people of Portmore, Kwame, and viewers were saddled with and had a toll road imposed on them, which sees them having to pay money to leave them their residence and pay money to go back to their residence after, you know, conducting business in the corporate area, for example, or going to work in the corporate area. There was no referendum. There wasn't even copious consultations on that matter. So much so that the residents of Portmore took the matter to court, and at least one senator responded with glee last week when I raised that issue, and he essentially thumped his chest that yes, the people of Portmore took the matter to court, but the PNP, the government of the day then, prevailed in the courts. They won the matter. But I pointed out to him, as I did last week, that that was much to the chagrin and to the dismay of the people of Portmore. So on the question of referendum, the truth of the matter is that copious consultations were held, and more so, this is a matter that the Jamaica Labour Party put to the people of Portmore insofar as its manifesto, and we saw what we saw. Of the 3 seats there in Portmore, the JLP came away with Robert Miller's Southeast St. Catherine, and of course my colleague Alanda Terrelong's East Central St. Catherine. And when Andrew Holness next goes to the polls, or causes the country to go to the polls, I trust that those 2 gentlemen will be returned, in the case of Alanda Terrelong, for a 3rd successive term as Member of Parliament, in the case of my good friend Robert Miller, for a 2nd successive term as Member of Parliament. So
to simply put it then, the People's National Party is being loud, raucous and ordinary unnecessarily, so that's what you're saying? They're being unnecessarily
confrontational and antagonistic on this matter, because as I said in my own substantive contribution to the debate in the Senate on this matter, there is no good reason that can be proffered or cited as to how Portmore becoming Jamaica's 15th parish will make Portmore as a space, and indeed its residents, worse off. In fact, Portmore becoming Jamaica's 15th parish will open up considerable opportunities for the people of Portmore, because not only does it build on their own aspirations for themselves as a people, but it will cause, potentially, of course, considerable flows of investments into Portmore, as we have seen over the period of time. And the government has already identified lands for the build-out of a hospital there in Portmore, and so a number of those social institutions and critical features of a parish will be built out in the period ahead. And so the people of Portmore will not be shortchanged on this matter. This is not a matter of expedience on the part of the JLP. This is in furtherance of decades-old aspirations. George Lee himself has now transitioned. The gentleman died without seeing it a reality. We have had a practice, Kwame, of kicking cans down the road in this country, talking, and not actually getting things done. This government, as it has done with NIDS, as it has done with public sector reform in terms of compensation review, and a host of other elusive things, including the Jamaica Teaching Council bill is getting things done. And we are unapologetic about that, my friend.
So with the Jamaica Labour Party's focus now on governance reforms, what specific initiatives are you going to be championing to ensure that policy decisions, so to speak, are effectively communicated to the Jamaican people?
Well, as an individual, as a senator, I am keen on matters touching on concerning public finances. I would have served a stint at the Ministry of Finance as a technical advisor to then Finance Minister Audley Shaw between 2009 and 2011. And I would have served for 2 separate periods at the Ministry of Education. So education issues are near and dear to me. I take and avail myself of opportunities all the time to communicate to my Jamaican brothers and sisters, whether in traditional media platforms such as this, CeenTV, or new media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, you name it. Because I know that there is information deficit out in the society. There's a degree of disengagement and mistrust amongst too many of our people. And you bring people into the confidence of the decision makers and leaders of the country when you sit and in a painstaking and patient way, go through with them, not talk down to them, but have a conversation with the people that will help them to better appreciate and understand the direction in which the government is proposing, in this case the Jamaica Labour Party is proposing to take the country, what some of the concerns are, what some of the potential pitfalls are, and when you accrue and secure the endorsement of the people, you are, well on your way. Because when you have the people in your back, as we have seen with a number of the interventions that we have come with as a government, including social housing, you know that you are well on your way to success, which is why the Prime Minister, notwithstanding issues of the Integrity Commission and swipes that have been taken at his own personal brand and reputation, the Prime Minister has bounced back considerably, as the polls is suggesting to us, because the people of Jamaica know that Andrew Michael Holness means well. He is one of us. He is from among us. He was raised in a 2-bedroom board house in Spanish Town. The gentleman went to school and eat Nutri-Bun and milk just like myself. And the long and short of it is that by the dint of his own effort, by virtue of taking him book at school, he is where he is today, and we're proud of him. And the gentleman is building infrastructure in the country, providing social housing for those persons who need it, increasing food storage and cold storage capacity for our farmers, increasing irrigation across the country, and importantly, Kwame, managing our public finances. Because when you manage the country's finances well, that is what enables you to do more for our brothers and sisters in the country, as I have just enumerated to you.
Yeah. So tell us now, I wanted to go over to election readiness based on all that you have been saying.
Sure.
And we want to get a little better understanding as to what the JLP's game plan is. If today, this day in history, the Jamaica Labour Party was to call the election, do you think that there is enough to maintain the 49-14, or to increase that? Do you think the capacity is there for that?
I'm going to make a profound observation, my brother. I trust it is an observation with which many commentators and observers will identify. When you consider and research for yourself the annals of Jamaica's political history, there is no political party, no administration in the history of Jamaica that is able to campaign and present itself seeking political office in the country on the basis of its achievements in service to the people of Jamaica in the way this Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party government can. I'll just repeat that in short for the benefit of our listeners and viewers. No other government or no other government seeking to be re-elected in this country can boast the record of achievement. Not Patterson, not Michael Manley, not Edward Seaga, not Bruce Golding, not Mrs. Simpson Miller. Yes? No other government in the history of Jamaica can boast the record of achievement that we have. And we have not done it for our own self-aggrandizement and to stand on a soapbox and to thump our chest. We have done it because we came to office in the first place back in March 2016, mindful of the deficits that exist in the country and being intent, my friend, on resolving and addressing those deficits. Deficits including just the state of people's pockets and well-being. Because when we came to office, We came to office against the backdrop of $60 billion in new taxes over that 4-year period between 2012 and 2016 under Dr. Peter Phillips and Mrs. Simpson Miller of the PNP. When we came to office, we came with the 1.5, which was our flagship and premier election manifesto commitment. Yes, we delivered on that, and importantly, we have spent the time since that resolving and addressing the hardships confronting our people and putting money back in people's pockets. And that is why, Kwame, we increased the minimum wage. We have instituted a social pension for persons aged 75 and older. We have increased payments under the PATH program. We have subsidized JUTC bus fares. We believe in rural folk, and we know that rural folk too deserve some reprieve, and that is why the JUTC is building out its routes, serving St. Thomas at present, now serving Castleton in St. Mary, and we intend for youths who hail from rural Jamaica, perhaps like yourself, to have a rural school bus system out in rural Jamaica in the months ahead, because we know that transportation costs can be quite prohibitive, and of course that is why as well we reduced the GCT rate from 16.5% to 15%, and on the electricity bills we are moving GCT from 15% to 7%. This government has done so much in the past, over the past 9 years. It makes P.J. Patterson's administration of the 90s look like a child, a midget, compared to what we have done. We have been a colossus in my own view.
So we have been hearing quite a bit, food for thought from Mr. Marlon Morgan. We'll go to our final break. Continue to stay with us. You're watching The Conversation. Welcome back to the final segment of the conversation, where we're looking at the Jamaica Labour Party's election readiness. Is it strategy or is it scrambling? Just before the break, we started looking at a number of issues. And I remember overhearing a discussion. Mr. Golden was in Connecticut, I think it was, and he was saying that, he doesn't know what will happen if the Jamaica Labour Party secures a third term, because he has accused this government of being corrupt, of being bereft of ideas, and a number of things. And, you have to look at it in its true place. Dr. Dayton Campbell has presented himself as a formidable opponent to you, supporting Mr. Golden. What does that look like if, for example, the Jamaica Labour Party should lose and the People's National Party would gain where it is now, prominence? How does that look for Jamaica? What do you imagine would happen?
All right, just to be very clear, yeah? The JLP took note of that video coming out of Hartford in Connecticut, where the opposition leader espoused a number of things, to include that the JLP has bought out the media. He charged that essentially the Gleaner elected to publish its poll findings vis-a-vis voter intent on a Saturday, and so on. Now, in terms of the charge made by the opposition leader, let me be very clear to the viewers and the listeners. The JLP does not profess to be a perfect government. We have been, however, a diligent, conscientious, responsive, and responsible government. We have been a hard-working set of people who mean Jamaica well. Mark Golding, as I said elsewhere in media, Kwame, was being alarmist, disingenuous, and I dare say, yes, deceptive, when he sought to frame the party, the JLP, the government that is, as being corrupt, because he knows that where allegations of corruption have arisen in the life of this administration, credible allegations of corruption in particular, action has been taken, and that is why there are persons who commenced the journey with us as an administration who are no longer members of the government. Yes? A number of names will come to mind. I don't necessarily need to relitigate them and get into that. But wherever there have been allegations of corruption, action has been taken, and that is the fundamental difference between the Jamaica Labour Party and the PNP. PJ Patterson used the broad banner of youthful exuberance to excuse corruption and, of course, deficits in public office. We take seriously the standards to which people are held as occupants of high office in this country. Just to be clear to your primary question, though, the JLP is going into the elections to win the elections. We believe, as I said in the previous segment, that our body of work, the heavy lifting that we have done, the degree to which we have brought Jamaica into the mainstream and have essentially created a new Jamaica. When you go up and down the country, when you move around, yes, the place is being developed, infrastructure is going up, highway infrastructure is being rolled out, a Montego Bay bypass, the South Coast Highway over in St. Thomas, and these are not toll roads either. This is the dividends from the hard-earned resources and the macroeconomic stability that the people of Jamaica has been, part and parcel of, because it is the people's sacrifices that has allowed the government of the day to be doing what it is doing. So, on the question of what Jamaica would look like were the PNP to form government, as I said, we're going into the elections to win, but just for the academic exercise that is, requested of you in the question just now, Jamaica would have a set of people presiding over the affairs of our country who do not believe in holding people accountable. And we have seen it, Kwame, in relation to the ongoing and, of course, disturbing PNP KCMC corruption scandal, where the allegation is that funds from the corporation, the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, that is, has been diverted and channeled for partisan political purposes, which is not how Kwame's tax dollars are intended to be used. It is not how Marlon's tax dollars are intended to be used. And that is, I dare say, offensive to us. And Mayor Swebe, Andrew Swebe of the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, that is, has tough questions to answer, and he has not been forthcoming. He has resorted to all kinds of contortionist tactics and all kinds of obfuscatory tactics, as opposed to making himself available, for example, to the press at a press conference to answer to those tough questions. Why is it that a staff member of his would have sent money to a PNP caretaker and then caution the PNP caretaker, impressing upon him that that was not for public knowledge? Why was that the case? So Mark Golding has not held Mayor Andrew Swebe accountable. Mayor Andrew Swebe is a senior member of the PNP. Dayton Campbell, his general secretary, who was heard in those leaked WhatsApp audio conversations, essentially explaining to the then PNP caretaker in Central Kingston, Lawrence Rowe, the basis on which the KCMC deployed money in the ways it did, as though the KCMC and the PNP are presiding over private funds as opposed to our tax dollars. Yeah. So Mark Golding hasn't held people to account. A PNP, a Mark Golding-led administration would be the hand of Esau, but the voice of Jacob. They will say one thing, but they will do another thing, Kwame.
So in your estimation, then, what you're telling the Jamaican populace to do is to use sleep, mark, death. That's what you're saying.
And mark death. It is something, it's a refrain that is often used, Kwame, on the political stump, and to just distill it into an appropriate and poignant Jamaican proverb. Take sleep, mark death, would be the directive to our people, the caution to the electorate.
So given now the narrowing margins that we have seen, Dr. Horace Chang, JLP General Secretary, he has expressed some amount of optimism about gaining support from the undecided voters. Are there any specific strategies that you can talk about that you have put in place to appeal to this particular demographic as you go into a general election?
So we know that based on Jamaica's political culture, Kwame, there's a considerable degree of cynicism, distrust, because of how politicians of the past and even their contemporaries have conducted themselves, that they have not acquitted themselves. So we know that there are persons who have been indifferent and apathetic in the body politic. But what we are contending, what we are submitting for their consideration is that, yes, we know that there's much left to be desired in terms of Jamaica's political system and how politicians have conducted themselves. However, if you are to step back for a moment and in a dispassionate way consider and look at how this government has performed, you will conclude and concur with us that the government means well. We don't profess to be a perfect set of people. We know that there are missteps that have been made. For example, how we approach needs initially, it may have been better looking back at it, of course, hindsight is 2020 vision, to have put that to a joint select committee, as we eventually ended up having to do, quite frankly, when the court ruled adversely against us. But pound for pound, and for all intents and purposes, the government has been delivering on the key issues confronting Jamaica. When you consider undecided voter, the state of our roads in Jamaica, for many years, having the resources to adequately treat with our road infrastructure in this country has eluded us. It is this Andrew Holness-led Jamaica Labour Party government that has managed our public affairs and our public finances in a way to be funding the Spark program to the tune of $45 billion, Kwame. Never before seen in the history of Jamaica. Omar Davies, as finance minister, was never able to carve out $45 billion. It is Nigel Clark, our erstwhile former finance minister, who was able so to do because of the sacrifices of the Jamaican people and the foresight of the government of the day. So we're sorting out our road infrastructure in the country. We're bringing water systems. Minister Samoda is building out water system to many communities. We're seeking to boost agricultural production in the country by irrigating farmlands that prior to this did not have sufficient and reliable irrigation to facilitate the work of our farmers.
So right now we can say that there's such a thing as incumbent fatigue. Voter turnout has been a concern in past elections. Yeah. All right. What measures can you speak of that are being implemented to mobilize and energize the electorate to ensure that supporters are motivated to vote? Because more persons have signaled an intent, but you know, you are in their second term, you're looking for a third term. You know, voter apathy is one thing, but you know, incumbent fatigue is also another. True.
Those are realities that confront political parties such as the Jamaica Labour Party, and we are mindful of those dynamics, Kwame. And the truth is that there are the 4 key M's in politics. I'm not a big head bud on this program, and so there are some strategic insights that I will not necessarily use this platform to articulate. But what I can say to you is that there is messaging that is important in the politics. Securing momentum is important. Mobilizing your supporters and knowing who your votes, where your votes are, who your voters are, and getting them out is important. And of course, money is important in terms of financing your campaign and funding your political organization, because you have to buy paraphernalia, shirts, you have to provide refreshment for volunteers, all of those things. So there are the 4 M's in the politics, and we're seeking to bring together those 4 M's along with people like Marlon and a young Floyd Green, Pernell Charles Jr., Matty Samoda, Robert Nesta Morgan, Abka Fitzhenley, Kerencia Morrison, some of the emerging players in the Labour Party, to offer them to the Jamaican people, because we believe that Jamaica is in safe hands, with like Nova Scotia, with us on
all
this
right
side.
So I like the puns that you're drawing out, but we just as we ease into the end of this program, bigger picture, governance, growth, and the Jamaican dream. You know, Jamaica is now approaching its 63rd anniversary of independence. Indeed. You know, and there's a palpable sense of national pride and the desire for progress. How does the JLP envision Jamaica's future, and what role do you see yourself playing in this evolution? You know, I want to specifically find out about the recent bill to remove King Charles as head of state, and this signifies a move towards full decolonization. Indeed. How does this initiative align with the JLP's vision for a more autonomous and progressive Jamaica?
So it aligns with it in considerable ways and profoundly. I envisage a Jamaica that will ultimately emerge as a republic, where we have a ceremonial type president, a prime minister that is elected, and all the attendant reforms. But importantly, the prime minister some months ago, Kwame, presented the Aspire initiative. He presented our pivot towards more accelerated and more robust levels of growth. Because yes, we have had growth since this government has formed, since this administration has formed government in spurts, but we have not had considerable and sustained levels of growth. We are resilient as an economy, yes, but we know that it is important to pivot at this point in time, moving away from just having attained macroeconomic stability to build on that macroeconomic stability and push on in considerable ways. And that is why Kwame, the Prime Minister, has instituted the SPEED initiative, which is essentially an efficiency program oversight committee, because one of the things that has handicapped us as a country is that the bureaucracy in this country has been so suffocating that it retards and has retarded, my friend, the pace at which government programs have been able to roll out, and it has worked against economic growth in the country. An investor may have deep pockets, may be seeking to come in and set up shop and provide jobs for our people and add to economic activity in the country, but because of suffocating bureaucracy, they have been impaired. And importantly as well, which is the direction in which the government is going, is the whole business of our human resources, making our people much more educated and much more skilled, because higher skills, especially in the areas that are the emerging jobs of the future. We are in the Industrial Revolution 4.0, and in terms of the skills and jobs of the future, robotics, animation, accounting services, legal services, financial services, you name it. These are the new and exciting, tech support, for example, these are the new and exciting careers of the future, and that is why the Prime Minister led a delegation to India to shore up things on the tech support side of things, to shore up things in programming and computing generally, because this is where you're gonna get some higher paying jobs from, and when you have higher paying jobs and of course more business opportunities and the attendant vocations that come with the jobs of the future, you will be having accelerated levels of economic growth and, of course, sustained economic growth going forward. So it's the whole idea of creating a new Jamaica, my friend, and you do that by upskilling your people and going into niche areas that the Jamaican people are well placed to maneuver in. That's why we have the Aspire program, and I'm commending it to our viewers. Check it out, because addressing human resources, addressing our bureaucracy, and of course boosting production, agricultural production, and setting up your infrastructure in the country are critical enablers, and all of those will work together nicely to secure the Jamaica that we in the Jamaica Labour Party envisage and are committed to creating.
Wow. So we just want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining the conversation. Special thanks to Senator Marlon Morgan for his insights. On behalf of the entire CeenTV production team, I am Kwame Thomas. See you next time.
Indeed.